This is Michael Luchies, Communications Manager for After School, the largest teen-focused social network in the U.S. And this is a special edition of the After School Social Change with Technology interview series. I'm joined today by Dr. Deas Clark. Dr. Clark is many things to many people, including being called America's pastor. She is a pastor, global strategist, and national spokesperson for the Brady campaign to prevent gun violence. She was also the first female pastor of the historic Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, and she joins us here today. Dr. Clark, thank you for joining me. How are you?
I am fine. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Now, many people would question what connection there could possibly be between a social network and a world-renowned pastor. But there are a lot of things and beliefs we share, including the power of communication and importance of having sometimes difficult conversations. In changing and growing as a country and as people, how important do you feel conversation is?
I think it's very important because unless we communicate, unless we put our feelings, our thoughts on the proverbial table, how will we come to a general consensus? How will we grow as a people? How will we learn from one another?
Now, what conversations do you think are most important to have right now? Obviously, there's a lot of conversations going on in the media. What do you feel is most important? What should we be talking about? What kinds of conversations should people be having?
Well, it's according to what part of the marketplace you find yourself in. If you're in the political arena, well, maybe you want to talk about the first 10 days of a new president. If you're in the church world, maybe you want to talk about how people are hurting and how people are yet still in search of, while yet still members of the church. So it's according to where you find yourself on the planet and what you're dealing with at that time, which yet still says that communication is important.
So then in your world, in your focus, what are the most important conversations that you're having during this time?
Well, for me, I'm still on the matter of gun violence and how we as a nation, we as a world, we must find ways to come together and understand that while everyone has the right to bear arms, no one is trying to take that away from them. But those who bear arms have a right, an obligation to have that the mindset, to have the capability of knowing how to use it, when to use it, and when it's not necessary or when it's a detriment to society. And so gun violence for me is still a hot topic. Hurting people for me is still a hot topic. While I'm no longer the pastor of Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina, I still have a heart for the people, not only in Charleston, but people everywhere.
And how does technology come into play with having these conversations?
Well, communications used to take forever and a day, to be honest. But now technology has helped us that in a matter of minutes. We can find out what's going on. We can speak to the matter. We can reach out and help in the midst of a crisis or a tragedy. So technology is a very important part of our world, and each day we're advancing, which is good.
Yeah, no, I agree. Do you think the benefits outweigh the downsides of technology and the many ways we have to communicate with each other, and why or why not?
Well, I think technology is beneficial. It's like anything else. Some people will use it for that which is good, and some people will use it in ways that are not so good. It is not technology that should be questioned. It's how we use technology that should be the question, because then that's based on the individual and not technology itself.
After the tragic shooting in Orlando, early in 2016, you visited and prayed with the community there, and a news outlet shared a quote from you that really stood out to me. It was, "I am here in Florida because I know what support can mean when you are going through a tough time." Now, in today's technology-driven world, which we were just talking about, do you think it's easier to provide that support to people who are dealing with tragedy and tough times in general, or is that something that should just be done in person?
Well, it took technology to inform me of what had happened. That's important. But I wanted to be there, to be hands-on, to offer the ministry of presence, to be able to touch the people and to allow them to touch me. That requires being there in person. And so being there in person and technology, they each have a very significant role. We just have to be able to balance the two, not allow technology to cause us not to give the human touch or to be the human presence in a situation, but then it is to respect and to revere technology, because technology now helps us to be minute to minute and responding to what's going on.
Now, our Vice President, Jeff Collins, had the opportunity to meet you at the LA premiere for an anti-bullying movie called Love Is All You Need. The film also tackles issues with the hate associated with the LGBTQ community. Now, as a pastor, have you faced criticism for your support of that community? And if so, on a personal level, how do you deal with it to not let that impact you negatively?
Well, now there has been some indirect but yet very strong blows towards me, I believe, because of my reaching out to the LGBTQ community. However, I am determined that I'm going to do what God has called me to do. And he did not call me just to minister to the few, but he sent me to the multitudes, to the whosoever. And so whosoever is in need of the word that I have to share, I'm willing to be there. I'm willing to go there. I'm willing to do whatever is necessary, because you have to make up in your mind whether you're going to obey what God is telling you to do, or whether you're going to allow bullying, or whether you're going to allow pressure or peer pressure or pressure from your supervisors or those who have leadership ability over you to sway you from what God is telling you to do. Now, there are those who feel, well, if you have a supervisor, you should always listen to the supervisor. That is true. But God is the ultimate supervisor to me and for me.
And what has helped you overcome barriers to get where you are today?
Well, I've always had challenges, be it because of my skin color, be it because of my gender, be it because of the way I speak. I've always had challenges, but I've always embraced them. I've always faced them, and God has always given me the courage and the strength to overcome them. Now, do they affect me? I wouldn't be human if I didn't say yes, they do affect me, but I don't allow them to imprison me to the point that I don't do what I must do.
And what's your advice for teens and others who feel like it's them against the world? Because I mean, one thing that we've really seen about this younger generation, also called Generation Z or Generation Alpha, is they're unlike any before, extremely diverse, and just much different than even millennials, which I fall into that category. So what's your advice to those teens?
Well, I think, first of all, that technology has helped with their diversity. You know, we are a product of our society is what I've been taught, what I've found to be true. And so the generations that are now embracing life at its fullest now, I think for them, the word that I would speak is simply to say, okay, be anchored in what you believe. And once you're anchored in what you believe, then stand on that. But just be sure that the group you're traveling with, the crowd that you're allowing to speak to your life, be sure that the message they're sending is a message you want to receive and a message that you want to transmit to others. It is important that we be ourselves as individuals, is true, but we must be an individual in light of knowing that there are others all around us. And it's not just about us. It can't just be about me, but it must be about us. You know, we got to look at life through a bigger lens than just our personal lens. And we must understand that to treat others the way we want to be treated is more than just a cliche. It is an actual road path that will lead us to what I believe is a happy and content lifestyle.
I'm curious about your views on anonymity. Do you see value in the ability of people to speak without having to reveal who they are? After school, for example, while it is moderated, it allows users to post messages without having to use their name. Do you see benefits in anonymity in today's world?
I do, because as we're growing, as we're being strengthened into allowing our voice to speak up to that which is wrong, it's a process. And so in the process, we may not be strong enough to give our names, but we're strong enough to share the facts. And it is the facts that's really important, because if it's true, it doesn't matter who says it. We just need to deal with it. So I think it's important that we allow people the choice as to whether they want to share their identity or whether they want to share the facts minus their identity. And I think we ought to be able to embrace both sides of that coin.
Now, we talked just a little bit about the Brady campaign and gun violence. What do you think is the key to stopping gun violence, and specifically violence in our schools?
Well, I think it's going to be when we get to the place where we respect each other. Oftentimes, people feel that their views, their point of looking at things, that's the only way there is. But when we realize that there's a sense of community that comes out of diversity, that when we embrace other mindsets, other cultures, other ways of looking at it, that doesn't mean that we have to abdicate what we think and what we feel, but just respect the fact that others have a right to have a position on a matter just as we do. And I think if we come to that place, I think if we would just realize that there is power and strength in diversity, I think we'll begin to not only appreciate others, but we'll begin to appreciate ourselves.
So how do you think teens can play a role in that, in preventing these acts, whether in their school or their community?
Will you please repeat that?
Sure. So how could how could a teenager help in limiting and lowering the impact that these events have on people and basically helping to stop them altogether?
I would think that if they were to realize that their voice matters, that what they have to say and the way they view it, that it's important. Because oftentimes some people only listen to people of their age group or of their generation. And so each generation has a voice. Each generation has an important role in society as a whole. So if we would just learn to speak up and speak out, I think it would be an empowering moment for a lot of people.
That's great. And once again, this has been Michael Luchies from After School here with Dr. Betty Deas Clark. Dr. Clark, do you have any final thoughts or words that you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, I think two things. One, I think those of us who are older, that we need to respect the voice of our younger individuals, because when we were younger, we wanted people to listen to us. Some did, some didn't, and it helped to shape our character into becoming who we are. And so sometimes when we validate others, it empowers them for not only today, but for the future. And I'd like to say to the teenagers, life seems hard sometimes, and sometimes it seems like it really doesn't make sense, and sometimes it doesn't. But just hang in there, because, everything's a process. When we were in first grade, we never thought we'd get out of first grade. But here we are now, teenagers and above and beyond. And so everything's a process. Just learn to endure the process, and it will transform you as you transform the world around you.
Great. Thank you again. And to anyone listening, you can follow Dr. Betty Deas Clark at Betty Deas, that's Deas Clark. Betty, thanks again for your time. It's been great speaking with you.
Thank you as well. It's been a pleasure.